Alright, here we go, week 12, criminal investigation class. We got a little Nickelback playing a song called Burn It to the Ground, because this week, which is week 3 of the COVID lockdown virus overreaction, we're going to talk about fire and explosion investigations. So I thought it'd be appropriate if we would burn it to the ground. I love it. Alright, well, we're going to, just a reminder for you people in criminal investigation class, that in the next couple weeks we're going to be doing the second part of our Ramsey reports. So that'll mean that you need to finish the book. You did 1 through 4 chapters, really, to answer those first questions. To finish, you're going to need to finish the book. So get on it. Here's your warning. Make sure you get something done. When we talk about fire and explosion investigation, I could go on literally for a couple days. I've trained in this in reference to teaching other fire investigators. I'm a nationally certified fire investigator through the National Fire Academy. I'm a State of Colorado District Court certified expert in this area. So this is one of those areas that literally we could just sit and continue to talk about fire, about explosions, about the investigations, about the profiles of the offenders, but we don't have time for that. We don't have time in the normal class. We don't have time, definitely, on a video that we're posting. So you are going to get the really abbreviated version of what this should be or could be. But hey, you know, that's what this is for, is to just give you a taste. When you're investigating a fire, one of the first things you got to remember is we investigate every fire, not because they're all set fires or fires that have some kind of criminality attached to them. We investigate them because we have to first determine what happened in the fire before we can say whether it was a set fire or not. The very basics of fire investigation need to follow the idea of what makes a fire work. Understand that fires are just a chemical reaction. It's going to always react the same way to the same stimulus. That's the beauty of a fire investigation. The fire never lies, because it is science. It is a chemical reaction. Somewhere along the line, you were probably taught one time about a fire triangle that had a fuel, had a heat source, had oxygen. You mix those 3 things together and you can have a fire. There's one component that was missing on that fire triangle, and that is what they call mixing or continuation, continuality, proportionality. You've got to have certain amounts of those 3 things to make a fire occur. You can take a match and you can strike it and it'll burn. It'll burn until the wood's gone. That's because the heat source, which is the sulfur and the other things that are on the phosphorus and some of the things in the striking part, burns hot enough, that's your heat source, mixed with the oxygen in the air, there's your oxygen piece, but those together burn hot enough to vaporize and burn the wood. Solids and liquids cannot burn. they can only burn once they've been heated to what they call their flash point, which means it's producing vapors, and then the vapors burn. If you've ever been at a campfire, somebody throws a brand, fresh piece of wood on there to keep the fire going. It doesn't immediately burst into flames. You'll see it start to heat up. You'll see what people think, well, it's smoking. It's not smoking. The heat from the campfires heating that piece of wood till it vaporizes. What you see is the vapors, and then those vapors will eventually ignite. The reason this is important to know, most every substance known to us has a flash point. Some of them higher and some of them lower in temperature than each other. Aluminum will melt, start a flash at like 2,700 degrees. Gasoline will flash at literally like 80-something degrees. The one is obviously going to ignite a lot quicker than the other because it will reach its flash point quicker. It'll vaporize quicker. Now, why this is important in our fire investigation. One of the things we're going to do, everybody looks at a fire scene and they go, I just see a bunch of burned up stuff. Your goal as a fire investigator is to start to interpretate what those things are that are making that burned up mess. Was that a piece of wood? Was that an aluminum window frame? Was that a piece of copper? Was that a piece of paper? What were these things that I'm now looking at in this pile of burned up stuff? Because that's going to tell us what temperatures occurred in that fire to make those things vaporize and then burn. That's extremely important because we're going to look through that fire scene and we're going to try to find the point of origin. Where did this fire start? And we're going to use those burned up things as one of our beginning points. We're trying to find where the fire burned the longest and the hottest. Because logic would tell us wherever it burned the longest usually means that's where it started. Wherever it burned the hottest usually means that's where it started. Now, I've got 2 PowerPoints out there in the content section of D2L. Go look over the PowerPoints. They're going to talk about some of these specific things in reference to longest and hottest burning, especially the one that I made. But just know that the fire is always going to burn the same. It always burns up until it hits something that diverts the fire. So if it's burning in a room, if it starts at floor level, it's going to burn up the side of the wall until it hits the ceiling. And then it's going to stop and spread out. Not because the fire naturally spreads out, but because it wants to continue to burn up and it's forced now to spread out. So if it starts at the floor and it hits the ceiling and spreads, you'll see a burning pattern more severe at the top than you do at the bottom. You'll see a thing called a V pattern. That because it's burning up, it's going to widen out and it'll actually make a pattern against a wall, against a piece of metal, against the side of the hot water heater. A lot of times fires start at the area at the bottom of a hot water heater. You'll see that V pattern go up on the side of the hot water heater. You're looking for all of these things to point you to that point of origin. Where did this fire begin? Once we determine that, we're going to look, was there an accelerant used? Is there a spot where it's burned through the floor and 2 feet away from it, the carpeting is still intact? Well, why would it burn so much hotter right where that floor area is that it burned through the carpet, through the pad, and then through the wood on the floor? What caused it to burn so hot in that one spot? Usually an accelerant. If it's on a floor that didn't burn through, but it's an irregular pattern, that's going to tell you that something was poured there to cause it to burn in that irregular pattern. All of these kind of things point to that point of origin. We need to look for things like on the walls. Once a fire inside a room hits the ceiling and spreads out, there becomes a thick, heavy layer of smoke. What is smoke? Smoke is unburned fuel. Smoke is vaporized fuel that hasn't ignited yet because it hasn't gotten hot enough yet. Smoke is chemicals. Smoke is a layer of soot, which is burned particles. As it creates from top down, it's going to superheat everything it touches. That layer of smoke is superheated air containing all those particles. And what it'll do in a room, if the fire gets put out before the room's consumed, it'll leave a line on the wall. Soot marked, burned, top half of the wall, clear bottom half of the wall. That's called a line of demarcation. That'll tell you where it burned down. If a fire started at one end of the room, you'll see the line of demarcation actually on an angle, more pointing towards where it burned longer and hotter, which is where our point of origin is. You're going to find things in a room that's consumed. A window frame on one end of the room completely melted. A window frame on the other end of the room not melted. That tells you it burned hot enough at one side to melt the aluminum, not hot enough on the other side. It's things like that that you look for. You just go through and you're picking through all this debris. Wood is a great indicator. It'll char on one side, not burn on the other. That'll tell you the direction of the fire. The fire attacked that piece of wood from one side and not from the other. You'll find a wall where the wall studs are completely burned through to the ground in 3 studs. The next ones on either side going out are not burned all the way through to the ones all the way at the other end of that wall that aren't burned at all. What does that tell you? In the middle of that wall, it burned hot enough to burn through that wall. At the corners, it didn't even burn hot enough to burn the wood. Those are all indicators of where that point of origin is. Once you find the point of origin, now you can start making determinations. Any fire that has more than one point of origin is, majority of the time, a set fire. An arson. Okay. Fires don't start in 3 places at the same time, unless someone does that. Accelerant use. Start fire. Use of what they call a trailer. So I put something in the room, make it run out, so I can light it at the other end of this trailer. Burns like a fuse to ignite something in the room. That's a sign of a set fire. Understand that fires can only be classified 4 things: accidental, natural, accelerant or set fire, or unknown. There's no such thing as a suspicious fire. I always love that term. You'll hear non-educated people say that all the time. This is suspicious fire. How was the fire acting suspiciously? If you're not ready to call it yet a set fire, then you don't call it anything yet. You say it's unknown. Investigation is continuing. You don't say it's suspicious, because then you might have to backtrack when the fire investigator comes and says it was actually faulty wiring that caused the fire. Now you look like an idiot because you already called it suspicious. So you don't do that, okay? Once you determine this to be an arson, now you have to determine who has the reason to start that fire. We do an arson typology. If you really want to get in depth on this, take profiling class. We do it every spring, and we do a whole section on profiles of arson. Yes, arsonists. There's really 6 profiles of arsonists. Revenge, excitement, vandalism, profit, crime concealment, and extremism. These are the same typologies for explosions that end up being not an accident. Number 1 reason for set fires: revenge. There's people, one of my favorite arsons I ever worked was a gal. She did 5 fires in a short span of time, and what it ended up being, every one of them was a revenge fire. Somebody pissed her off in her life, and she'd go find their stuff and light it on fire. Lit an apartment on fire, lit a car on fire, lit a business on fire, lit a school on fire. You pissed her off, she burned your stuff. So you're looking for that. Excitement fire. Very rarely. But there are people that actually are what they call pyromaniacs. They actually physically get excited over the fire, over the emergency response, all of that kind of stuff. Sometimes the excitement is they want to play hero. They love to start a fire and then be first on scene and save lives. That falls under this category. Vandalism. This is where juveniles come into play on setting fires. They do it for the idea just to burn stuff. If we're all honest with ourselves, we are somewhat infatuated with fire. You go to a camp out, you go to a bonfire, everyone loves to stare at the fire, throw stuff in the fire, play around the fire. We like fire. When you're a kid, you want to experiment with fire. Kids do that. This is where that falls under vandalism. Fire for profit. This is the typical, my restaurant's failing, where I need an infusion of cash to remodel, so I torch it. I get the insurance money, I fix what I need to fix. Crime concealment. This is not as common as revenge. Sorry about that. But it is one, as a fire investigator, you see. People think that if I commit a crime, a burglary, a theft, robbery, even homicide, and then I burn down the scene, they won't know it was the other crime. And maybe I'll get away with both crimes, the first crime and the arson. A couple of my favorite ones were these. Okay? One was actually a homicide. Killed his wife, torched the house, trying to conceal the fact that he stabbed her to death in bed. These are interesting to work because once you start working them, you're essentially working 2 crimes. you're working the fire, and then you're working the crime they tried to conceal. Last one is extremism. Groups, terrorism groups, I don't ever call them in my world domestic or international. Terrorists are terrorists. They are people doing crimes for a cause. And once you identify the cause, then you can classify it whatever you want. Will terrorists will set fires, will bomb things as part of their extremist ideology. Famous case in Colorado, they burned the ski chalet at the top of Vail Mountain to the tune of millions and millions of dollars of damage. That was an eco-terrorist group. Obviously bombing buildings. You know, one of the obviously really famous one in America is the, bombing of the federal building in Oklahoma City. Those are terrorist acts done by terrorists for their cause. Now, if you want to get all crazy about the cause, then go be a Fed. They love to really go crazy on the cause. I worked these cases as crimes. So I was more interested in solving the crime than worried about the politics of the cause. But, hey, some people love the cause. But that's the sixth typology. Now, I'm going to cut it off here. I could go deeper. I could go more. I would love to. I love talking about this stuff. But this is about where we should go. So, go look at the PowerPoints. Text me or email me if you have any questions. And have fun. See ya.